Today, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. And we stand together to win the war against terrorism.
Orange terrorist alert issued on Friday.
American Airlines flight apparently had an explosive device.
Jihad against America.
Man slashed two police officers with it.
The suspect was motivated by radical Islam.
A new ISIS hostage video.
Heading Americans taking
travel to join ISIS. Suspected terror cell right in our own backyard.
As an American, he can easily blend in here.
An under 10-minute shooting spree, the lone gunman left dozens killed and wounded in the nation in mourning.
With a radical Islamic killing of Anwar
al-Awlaki,
$2 trillion.
Stands accused of
Tracking a Charlotte man connected.
They don't know what building he came from.
Against terror, both of whom happen to be American citizens.
Because of 9/11, we tend to think of terrorists as foreigners. There was 19 Arabs who came in and did the 9/11 attacks. But this group is overwhelmingly American. 8 out of 10 are U.S. citizens or legal residents. Half of them were born in the States. The bigger question is why? I mean, why is that 10 years, a decade, more than a decade after 9/11, American citizens and are signing up for an al-Qaeda group or al-Qaeda ideology? And that is a big puzzle.
We're racing against time to find these domestic radicals.
Homegrown terrorists living among us. These people want to kill us.
It can happen in a shopping mall. It can happen at a train station, at a bus depot, on any crowded street.
You have to be here to understand what I'm saying.
So this is ISIS's English language in-flight magazine, Dabiq. It's all about how great it is, you know, when you come and join the jihad and you look at the great job we're doing, we've liberated all this territory, and they're really trying to present themselves as a state.
This is the 5th edition of the Dabiq magazine. You know, they've got my name labeled up there as the Crusader Andrew Liebman. It was a little disconcerting to see my face in the ISIL magazine. More disconcerting probably for my wife than for me, but.
Before, if you wanted to get these ideas, you might have gone to a prayer study group. You don't need to do that because it's all available on the internet. So you can self-radicalize in the comfort of your own bedroom, and you can radicalize very quickly.
There's this need to help all these Muslims that they're hearing about who are dying from drone strikes, who are getting killed by whatever forces. And here, Islam would be the answer, and they might be the people who are doing it. Their messaging is very, very romantic. They have the same type of very simplistic romantic stories. It's 100% utopian. Because the idea was that if you establish an Islamic society, all the problems in the world will go away.
Arrested at O'Hare on Saturday night.
He planned to take 2 siblings and go overseas to fight with ISIS.
Khan seemed like any other teenager living in the Chicago suburbs, goofing around with his friends, working part-time, and going to college.
I taught him in 9th grade in biology class, yeah. Very sweet kid, very respectful, and, you know, he was pretty quiet in class, but, you know, very, very polite.
I've not talked to Hamza. I've talked to everybody else in the family, including the 2 who are planning on going. The Khan siblings wanted to live in what they thought would be paradise on earth. They thought they'd be in a place where everyone was hugging each other and reciting passages of the Quran.
it's a possibility that, our young students could take that path or make those type of choices.
A pair of young Minnesota men are charged now with trying to help the terror group ISIS.
A 17-year-old boy in the suburbs of Washington. A 19-year-old woman.
He grew up in Minnesota.
All the way from Minneapolis.
2 New York men.
The children were frequently seen going back and forth to the Islamic school across the street.
What about the parents? Did they know any of this was going on?
They did not know.
They're afraid to say anything to their children. They're afraid to engage in these conversations because the political context that we're living in, there's also a heightened sense of fear of having these conversations, too. Yeah. We still have parents who think that, if you type the word jihad in on Google, that's, you got to be monitored.
Chasing after. For a lot of parents, there's a very deep sense of paranoia. We had this event in my Sunday school. Parents became very upset that we had junior high schoolers speaking on camera about ISIS.
People mock us where they say that, how can you say you're a peaceful religion if in the Quran it says you can kill?
Some staff, they're apprehensive, right, that, what will be the implications if we talk about these topics.
There's ayahs in the Quran that, when taken out of context, seem like that.
The rhetoric from ISIS is pretty specific in terms of they will give verses to justify their acts. There is an aspect of our religion that deals with taking up arms, but we show how they're misreading the verse too, and what are they leaving out, and what are they not including. And now the purpose is to show them, well, what is the proper understanding of this?
We understand that we don't hurt people that aren't hurting us.
I think that demonstrates that there's still a lot of work to do, and if a student asks a question, unless you engage them and you provide their answers, they're going to still look. Yeah, right, and either it's you or it's someone else, and that's where the real danger stands, is who's that someone else.
Where are you from, Ben?
Seattle.
And where is home, Ben?
I already told you where I live.
I didn't ask where you live. I asked, where is home? Do you need me to repeat the question?
Just kind of take you through. My cousin's father died in '98, and his mother died in 2001. And that's when our family really saw him start to go to mosque and pray regularly. And he'd come over and start asking me about, don't you want to start praying? And don't you want to start doing this? And I'm like, listen, man, I see you're dealing with your parents' death, and God be with you while you're, going through that. And if religion is going to be the path for you to find, okay, that's cool. If you look at his own personal life, he's, socially inept. I don't think didn't know how to talk to girls if he wanted to, and whether or not he had his sexual identity crisis or not, I don't know. But that's on the table, I think. And his fear of going to war.
The reporting is that your cousin had made requests not to be deployed overseas to the war. Is that right?
Yeah, we've known for the last 5 years that was probably his worst nightmare. He deals with stories. He would tell us how he would hear things, horrific things.
Him going to medical school, he picked psychiatry, I think, because he thought that would be the least amount of blood that he'd have to deal with. He was afraid of war. I don't think he ever enlisted thinking he was going to go to combat.
Hassan was apparently about to deploy to Iraq.
Getting deployed may have simply been too much.
I think the Department of Defense should allow Muslim soldiers the option of being released as conscientious objectors to decrease adverse events.
I looked at this, and I know this makes a lot of people angry, but said, I'm not sure as a professional with decades of experience in the counterterrorism business, I would characterize this as terrorism. Because if you're looking at the psychological state of the person, do you want to jump to the conclusion that he clearly had a political intent? I thought he was mentally unbalanced.
In a word, he was suicidal. He decided to use an excuse with religion, and to use that and bring everybody down who identifies with being Muslim. Selfish. And how dare him.
And he gave us a ride and actually gave us a little tour of his neighborhood, and then we went to his house. I was curious. I needed to know who this guy was, what the foundation was for. I didn't know what he was doing. And we talked about his cousin, and we talked about what his experience was. We talked about what our experience was. It's a lot harder on Nader and his family than it is on mine. And I say that because we both lost our relatives. But I get to miss my dad. I get to celebrate my dad's life. I get to talk about my dad without worry that you're going to judge me for who my dad was. Nader lost friends and clients. And coming out in the open to say that was my cousin and I want to fight that is a lot harder because people are a lot meaner to the family of the person who killed than the family of the person who got killed.
The relationship that Carrie and I had is the real American spirit, because that's what I think America wants. America just wants to know everything's okay and that they don't have to be afraid. You'll be able to see with your own eyes and your own ears if you come talk to us that. Yeah, you see my family. Kind of pull back the veil or pull back the hijab and let them see what the family's really like so that they can perhaps calm down.
Awesome.
I didn't go to meet Nader to go fix some massive, iconic problem. I went to go meet Nader because I wanted to meet his family and tell him I hope they're okay. That's it. That's how that started, right? I just wanted to go fix my life too. I wanted to understand a little more, right? That's it. That's the basic start. You just have to admit that things aren't perfect and you want to make them better. And me and his cousin used to go and speak to students like you guys. That felt like a victory. And a victory over all of the extremist crap that we have all over the world right now.
In the meantime, ISIS continues its bloody campaign.
Widespread concern about the threat posed by a group that has been beheading Americans.
ISIS has demonstrated time and time again its lack of respect for human life.
91% said that they see ISIS as posing a vital threat.
Look, I understand why Americans get concerned about terrorism. It can happen at the Boston Marathon. It can happen in a military base in Texas. The randomness of this affects Americans, the fact that they can't explain the ideology. But if I have to balance this against other things that affect American life, I would step back and say, I'm somebody who practiced this for decades. I don't worry about it very much.
Homegrown terrorists living among us.
Fear of ISIS cells emerging here.
Every single state.
These sympathizers are literally everywhere in America.
We live in a 24/7 news cycle. ISIS is a big news story. 7 out of 10 Americans believe ISIS is a very serious threat to the United States. Which is pretty astonishing because if you think about it, the fact is neo-Nazis, far-right anti-government terrorists are killing quite a number of people. Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma City bombing killed 168 people. So the point is there are homegrown terrorists who are motivated by ideologies other than jihad. If you do the thought experiment where the guy in the Kansas Jewish center shooting in 2014 shouted Allah Akbar instead of Heil Hitler, it would have got a lot more attention.
Claims that there's an ISIS plot targeting American subways.
Say that the president has been too cautious in responding to this threat.
I've had people challenge me, people who don't know the terrorist business, moms in suburban America say, you say you shouldn't worry much, you're wrong. I worry a lot. There's this Muslim wave of terrorism that's coming at us and it's changing our culture. And my answer to them is, to be blunt, you have got to be kidding me. You're welcome to worry. That's your responsibility. But I'm an analyst and I deal with fact. The fact is, if you judge threat by the impact on an American family, terrorism has a minuscule to near zero impact.
Nearly a decade and a half after 9/11, we have managed the problem to a large degree. It's politically very hard to say that, but we've done a pretty good job. We're not going to abolish terrorism as a tactic. It's been around since the dawn of history. The question is, how worried should we be? It certainly doesn't make sense for us to communicate to the American public that this is an existential problem. And yet, we've put up this huge national security apparatus, has spent literally hundreds of billions of dollars on it.
And I think you could argue that there are lots of things that are way more dangerous to Americans than terrorism.
We ought to be focused more on cancer research or obesity or drugs or gun violence, but that doesn't capture the American imagination as much as the threat from ISIS.
How many people know here somebody who's been murdered? A lot of us. It's not an isolated case. I'm not abnormal. My dad happened to get a lot of news coverage because of the way it happened, but it's the same way a lot of other people died too.
It's interesting looking at mass shootings in this country. If you look at school shootings, for example, you might start to say, why aren't you looking at Facebook postings to figure out when a 16-year-old is going to go south? Why aren't you comparing those Facebook postings to information that indicates the kid's family has a weapons license? Have you looked at his travel data? Most of those you'd say, I'd be deeply offended if we did that in America.
Expectativa em Casimiro de Abreu, uma pequena cidade da região leste do estado do Rio. Dizem que amanhã disco voador vai pousar lá. O aviso foi dado por um homem que se identificou como Edilson Barbosa. Ele disse ao prefeito que disco voador de Júpiter ia pousar na fazenda Nossa Senhora da Conceição, a 10 quilômetros do centro da cidade.
O município Casimiro de Abreu foi escolhido porque é um município pesquisado pelos extraterrestres.
Mas quando é que chega o disco voador?
Segundo a informação da Barbosa, o disco voador chega dia 8 de março às 5h20 da manhã.
Casimiro de Abreu fica a 138 quilômetros do Rio. Muita gente está indo para lá, mas a população está dividida. Uns acreditam, outros não.
Você acredita em disco voador?
Acredito.
Você acha que vem um?
Acho que vem.
Eu nunca vi, né?
Me impressionava, porque eu não conseguia levantar os antecedentes do Barbosa. Por mais que eu quisesse, a mulher dele também. E, embora ele me parecesse uma pessoa comum, ele tinha alguma coisa de mistério. Aquela coisa que você vai apurando, mas não encontra nada. Ou seja, assim, não encontra quem era o pai, quem era a mãe.
Eu não vi o mar, não lo ia poder ver nunca. La montaña la imagino como una inmensidad tremenda. No hay silencio, porque silencio absoluto no existe.